All right, who has a nativity scene up at home? Raise your hands. Okay, about half. Yeah, we don't have one up this year. We've had them before, so I guess most people, if you don't have them, you've had them before. Well, the thing I want to know is, how do you handle the great nativity scene controversy? What's your position on it? You know what I'm talking about? Carol knows exactly what I'm talking about, and we see how her family handles it because Kathy set up the nativity scene. Candy, there we go. And you can tell that she has been brought up in the wise men don't belong at the stable tradition. Yeah, so because you realize the wise men didn't get there for, maybe a couple years, probably from what we can tell. So, even this is probably a little close. They're probably supposed to be out in the foyer somewhere there to get, 2 years away. But, they weren't there. So what do? They're included with just about every nativity set. But they weren't at the birth of Jesus. We know that. Well, you know what? I found a passage that actually justifies including them in the nativity sets. It doesn't say they were there. We know that's not true. But what it does is it takes a big picture view of everything. And that's why they're in the sets. They are part of generally the Christmas story that we've come to, associate with it. So I found this passage that does take that view. It's all one big picture, but the problem is it raises another significant issue. Not just where a certain piece goes, but there is a piece that's totally missing from the nativity set. I've never seen it offered. It's never been an option. There is a missing piece from the nativity set. Any guesses on what that is? The star. Sometimes that's there, sometimes it's not.
The cross.
Carol says the cross. A rod of iron, there's one. Had someone once when I preached this say the little drummer boy. I go, well, that's a neat thought. No, none of those. There we go. All right. Yeah, there is a missing piece that is definitely mentioned here. And the issue is it indicates a bigger problem, not just with our nativity sets, but with our whole view of our spiritual lives. Something is missing there. We're going to be in Revelation chapter 12. So you can look at that. I'll be reading from the NIV this morning. And as you probably know about the book of Revelation, we got this different book, not anything really like it, certainly not as much as Revelation, goes into, these prophecies of things. And I tell you, I've never met two people who agree on every detail in Revelation. I don't know if you could find them, because there's so many little things, so many details like that. But we're going to look at in one of these passages that still, you're not going to come away even knowing every detail about Revelation 12, but hopefully you'll come away seeing something that maybe you've never thought about, certainly in terms of the Christmas story. So Revelation 12, starting at verse 1, it says, "A great sign appeared in heaven. A woman clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet, and a crown of 12 stars on her head. She was pregnant and cried out in pain as she was about to give birth. Then another sign appeared in heaven, an enormous red dragon with 7 heads and 10 horns and 7 crowns on its heads. Its tail swept a third of the stars out of the sky and flung them to earth. The dragon stood in front of the woman who was about to give birth so that it might devour her child the moment he was born. She gave birth to a son, a male child, who will rule all the nations with an iron scepter. And her child was snatched up to God and to his throne. The woman fled into the wilderness to a place prepared for her by God, where she might be taken care of for 1,260 days. So we know this child here is Jesus. And we know this is talking then about the birth of Jesus. The idea of he will rule the nations with an iron scepter comes from Psalm 2. That was a messianic prophecy. Jesus is the Messiah, this promised one who God had said for years and years was going to come and Israel had waited for. Well, you notice then, it mentions him in verse 5, but it also says then the child was snatched up to God. Well, there you have in verse 5 Jesus' entire life. He's born, But he's also snatched up to God, and that's after his death, burial, resurrection, the ascension. So in that verse, you have this whole big picture here, even beyond what we typically associate with the Christmas story. You have the woman, and of course our first thought for her would be Mary. And obviously she is the woman who gave birth to Jesus, but really as it talks about the woman, it's more than her. It's talking about the nation of Israel. Because you have the 12 stars, which would be the 12 tribes, and specifically the remnant, the faithful nation of Israel, which led to, and really it's not even just as this passage continues, you'll see it's not just Old Testament Israel, it's New Testament Israel. It's the church is this woman who plays this role of giving birth and then also continuing on there. And then the dragon, of course, is Satan. The dragon is Satan, and here is this red dragon with 7 heads and crowns and horns and such. So there's the missing piece. I couldn't find an actual dragon. It's not like they have those. Like, your nativity scene, would you like with the dragon or without? I've never found it, so I had to print up the picture there of the dragon. That there is now a complete nativity set. That shows the picture that we get from this. And you have then Satan, it says he's seeking to devour the child. Well, realize that there as we see this big picture. Of course, that includes Herod at the beginning seeking to kill Jesus. But remember, that's 2 years away, so it's putting all that into one element. And really, it's not even just that. Anytime during Jesus' life, the times they picked up stones to kill him, the things they wanted to do, and then certainly, of course, when he is crucified, that is the dragon seeking to devour the child. And so the missing piece is this dragon. And, okay, all these years we've all had an incomplete nativity set. All right. But the bigger issue is it raises this question as you look on your handout that's going to view us, what is missing from our view of life? What's missing from our view? The thing with nativity sets is they focus on the physical. This one doesn't have an angel. Some of them do. And you might think, well, an angel, that's a spiritual being. Yes, but the angels made a physical presence. They could see them. They were there. Everything about this is focused on the physical. And that sometimes is our problem. We're focused on the physical world. And we leave out the spiritual world. We've been seeing that as we've been going through Mark, a spiritual versus a physical focus. For us, it can be the same way, and this passage is going to help bring that to mind. What might I be missing, not just from my nativity set, but from life? What might I not be taking into account here? Now, I said I'm not going to explain the book of Revelation today, not even this whole passage. There's some things that are raised here. It says in verse 3, then another sign appeared, an enormous red dragon, 7 heads and 10 horns and 7 crowns. What does that mean? I don't know. And no one else knows for sure. Some people will give specific, here's exactly what it means. Others will just say those are the Bible complete numbers, the 7 and 10 and, those things there. It's just saying, Satan in all of his power and in all of his evil and everything he's doing. This is meant to symbolize that there. And you go on, its tail swept 1/3 of the stars out of the sky and flung them to earth. That does seem to indicate, from what we can tell, that when Satan rebelled against God, thinking maybe he could overthrow God, 1/3 of the angels joined with him, and they lost. They fell to earth, and we'll explain that more as we go on there. But you look at this, one other detail down here that's going to come up a couple times even today as we read, but it comes up throughout the book. It talks about this period of 1,260 days. In other places it says 3.5 years, which is what 1,260 days is. And then there's other places in Revelation where it refers to a time, times, and half a time. So a time, 1 year, times 2 years, and half a time. You add that up, that's 3.5. So what it seems to be, it's talking about everything that Satan has done to confront Christ, and as we'll see, not just him, but his followers, until his coming. Everything from Jesus' birth until his coming, that's what this period is talking about, the 3.5 years here. And it says this woman then will be taken care of by God. Well, why did she have to be taken care of? What was going to happen? And we see that then in verse 7. And it starts with, then war broke out in heaven. And you need to realize, oftentimes in Hebrew literature, and applies to the book of Revelation, it's not necessarily chronological. It's not like, oh, start here and you just keep working down. Sometimes it goes back over something. It's a little bit like Hebrew poetry, the parallelism. It says the same thing in a slightly different way. Well, that's what this is. It's not saying, okay, after this happened, then there was this war. No, it's then in terms of going back and looking at this picture from a different perspective. And we'll see, because it's talking about when Satan rebelled. Then war broke out in heaven, verse 7. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon. Michael is the archangel. And the dragon and his angels fought back. So talking about Satan and his fallen angels, which we refer to as demons. But he, Satan, was not strong enough, and they lost their place in heaven. The great dragon was hurled down, that ancient serpent called the devil, or Satan, who leads the whole world astray. He was hurled to the earth, and his angels with him. Now, once again, verse 10 is going to give some details from a different perspective, and specifically some of the time when this happened. Verse 10 says, Then I heard a loud voice in heaven say, Now have come the salvation and the power and the kingdom of our God and the authority of his Messiah. For the accuser of our brothers and sisters, who accuses them before our God day and night, has been hurled down. And in verse 11, they triumphed over him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony. Well, now as you look at that, and it talks about Satan being hurled down, there definitely was a time when he was hurled down before, it seems like creation even, when Michael fought and what we just read about there. But this talks about another sense in which Satan is hurled down when it says he's overcome. They triumphed over him by the blood of the Lamb and the word of their testimony. Well, the blood of the Lamb is Jesus dying on the cross, but who is the they? That's talking about believers. They, us, we triumphed over him by accepting what Jesus did. And as we spread that word and others accept that, it's a triumph over Satan. And as it says, his accusations that he had been making against people. Satan had been accusing and not just saying, hey, you know, Steve got angry and said a word he shouldn't say the other day. But the accusation is because Steve has sinned, God, he can't be in your presence. You can't have a relationship with him. Satan had been making that accusation. Well, that accusation then no longer has any power because of the testimony about the blood of Christ. So they did not love their lives so much as to shrink from death. So not talking about angels, they weren't worried about dying. Talking about believers who did their testimony, gave their testimony, sometimes at the cost of their very life. Verse 12, Therefore rejoice, you heavens, and you who dwell in them. Why? Because Satan's no longer there. But woe to the earth and the sea, because the devil has gone down to you. Now here is where the devil dwells. He is filled with fury because he knows his time is short. You look at this victory over Satan, again, it came by the blood of the Lamb. It came by Jesus dying on the cross, and no longer is there a basis for that accusation. Sins have been forgiven. Prior to this, what it seems, God had rolled back sin. Satan was right when he said, listen, God, people have sinned. They can't have a relationship with you. You're holy. They're not. He was right. But God had rolled back sins. Like, I won't punish them this year. Sort of the year of atonement seems to be the symbolism of that. I won't punish them this year. I won't punish them this year up until Christ comes, and now the sins have truly been paid for, and that accusation of Satan then has no basis for believers. He was able to accuse us, but now he's been cast down, and it does say that in 2 Corinthians 4, Satan is the god of this world, the god of this age. It doesn't mean that he's in control and God can't stop him, but it means this is his domain. This is where he operates, and it goes on to show what he does. Verse 13, When the dragon saw that he had been hurled to the earth, he pursued the woman who had given birth to the male child. The woman was given the 2 wings of a great eagle so that she might fly to the place prepared for her in the wilderness, where she would be taken care of for a time, times, and half a time, out of the serpent's reach. Then from his mouth the serpent spewed water like a river to overtake the woman and sweep her away with a torrent. But the earth helped the woman by opening its mouth and swallowing the river that the dragon had spewed out of his mouth. All right, so you get what that is? If you don't, yeah, it takes a while to think about it. What that is talking about is, and here's where the woman switches from, again, giving birth, in the sense of Old Testament Israel, to being almost the child then. This is the church now. This woman that Satan is seeing there, when he's been hurled to earth, well, that's after the cross. It's now that the church has come after Jesus resurrects in the day of Pentecost, the church is born. Satan is now pursuing that woman, that's the church, trying to destroy the church. And that's what it seems. At first, Satan tried to destroy the church as a whole. And that's where it talks about spewed water like a river. All of his attempts to wipe out the church as a whole, to keep it from even really starting. The imprisonment of the leaders and things like that. But it talks about the earth helped the woman by opening its mouth and swallowing the river. That would be the providence of God. Satan tried to destroy the church as a whole. God protected the church as a whole, the early leaders, things like that, and got it going so there was no chance now of the church dying out. Well, then Satan shifts his attention. Verse 17, then the dragon was enraged at the woman and went off to wage war against the rest of her offspring, those who keep God's commands and hold fast their testimony about Jesus. So what that seems to be saying now is Satan realizes I can't keep the church from happening, can't wipe out the church, but I can attack individual believers. And that's what he does, has been doing, and continues to do. So probably not the passage you expected to hear this morning, as there's going to be a Christmas sermon this morning, right? Turn your Bibles to Revelation 12. But it is a Christmas passage. It talks about the birth of Jesus, right? That's what it requires for a Christmas passage. Verse 5 has that. Again, you think about it. When you're missing the dragon, if you were walking by a bunch of nativities, you're probably not going to notice much. I mean, maybe you've seen some. The Snoopy one might catch your attention. I've seen some now with the Coke soda cans that have the names. And every once in a while, you'll see one that okay, that one's unique. But for the most part, you could walk by 100 nativity scenes and never blink. But if you walked by one and saw a dragon, that'd get your attention, right? Yeah, you'd notice that because we don't see that. It's a different picture. Well, again, what I want us to get is a different picture of life. I think we walk through life and don't realize there's a dragon trying to kill me. Satan is there. He's real. He's trying to destroy me and destroy my family. He's trying to keep me from spending eternity with God. He's trying to do that to everyone around there. Again, what is missing from my view of life? And, the first thing is we've been saying, what's missing from some people's view of life is that there is a spiritual realm. There is a part of the world we don't see. You look at Revelation 12, and it continues into our day, but much of what happened there happened before us. We weren't present here. But you know what? Even the people who were present, not you guys, sorry. Even the people who were present, they didn't see a dragon. The shepherds didn't come up that night and say, wow, red dragon, 7 heads. They didn't see him. It wasn't a physical reality, but it was a spiritual reality. Just because you don't see it, doesn't mean it's not real. I think sometimes about things that happen halfway around the world. Do you ever hear something and you wonder, well, what was I doing? I watched a movie, it's been a while ago, but it was a battle movie about some soldiers, fighting in Afghanistan, fighting for their life, and it gave the date. And I'm like, what was I doing when they're on a hill fighting for their life? And I'm totally unaware. But it was real. It's just as real. I'm not aware, I don't see a dragon, but he's real. There is a spiritual realm around us, and we can't see. But that's really the basis of who we are as believers. What do I believe in? There is a God. There is a spiritual realm. That's really the key. I've said before, that's the key distinction between worldviews. How do you view the world? Well, the most basic foundational distinction is either you view the world as having a spiritual dimension or not. What I see is all there is, or there's more than what I see. And so many people refuse to accept this spiritual dimension. At least they refuse to accept God. That's really the key to that. Is there a God or not? A while ago, when my daughter was at a different school, I remember going in to pick her up and waiting at the front desk, and this girl, she was there, a student helper manning the front desk, talking to a friend. Her friend saw her necklace, a little stone, and asked her what it was. She said, "Oh, that's my anxiety stone. I wear it close to my heart. It soaks up all my anxiety, and then when there's a full moon, I set it outside, and it all goes away." I thought, really? Stones you can believe in, God you can't. Now, I didn't know what her view of life was, but again, people will believe that, but no, there can't be a God. Why? Well, I don't see Him. Really? What about the evidence? There is an unseen spiritual realm, and we don't have time to go into all the evidence. I've talked about it before. Just the fact that life is here. People want to talk about evolution, life getting more complicated. Okay, there's no answer for how life started, how things went from non-living to living. Ask someone. There is no answer. It came up once. Someone said, "Oh, I think life came here from another planet." Okay, where'd that life start from? You can't have an infinite regression of causes. There has to be a first cause of life, of matter itself. God's the only answer that makes any sense, because God by nature is an uncaused being, an uncreated being. There is a spiritual realm. The evidence is there. Stop and look at it. What about Jesus? Who was this person, Jesus? And so many people today, most won't deny He lived. There's evidence that shows us from Roman documents He lived. Okay, who was He? Well, He was a good man. He was a great teacher. No, Jesus claimed to be God. Once you claim to be God, you can't be a good man, a great teacher, any of that. If you say, "I am God," then you only have three options. One, you're crazy, because you really think you're God. Two, you're a liar, because you know you're not, but you think you can make a buck or something off of it. Or three, you truly are the Lord. Lunatic, liar, or Lord. Those are the three options. Which was it? John says in his gospel, Jesus performed many other signs in the presence of His disciples, which are not recorded in this book. But these are written, why? That you may believe that Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of God, and that by believing you may have life in His name. In other words, He claimed to be the Son of God. I've written these things. I've seen these signs. All the miracles were signs. They were evidence that Jesus was who He said He was. That's why they're there. Now, we aren't going to be able to prove most of Jesus' miracles. You're never going to find footsteps on the Sea of Galilee. You're never going to find empty wine bottles from the wedding feast. All of those, okay, it says it. Do I believe it? Well, the one miracle that Jesus did that is the most provable, that has the most evidence that you can look at and debate either way, is the resurrection itself. Did it happen? If it did, you can believe all the rest. If it didn't, don't believe any of the rest. Well, there's more evidence for the resurrection than against it. There is no credible alternative. Is there a supernatural realm or not? When you really examine the evidence, yes, there's more evidence for it. Now, do I operate on faith? Yes, I don't know. But anyone who says there doesn't know. They're operating on faith as well, and they have less evidence. They actually require more faith than I do. So if a disciple, and I say that not just Christian, because sometimes we hear Christian and think, okay, I'm a Christian, but I'm not really a disciple. That's like the higher level guys. No, I'm a Christian. I'm a disciple. I'm a believer. If I'm a believer, I believe there's a God. This one should be obvious. This is where we like to hear these. Okay, I can shake my head. I believe there's a spiritual realm. So far in the sermon, I'm doing good. But am I always aware of it? Do I live consistently with the fact that there is a spiritual realm? Yes, I believe. Do I live it out? This dragon changes everything about a nativity, doesn't it? You keep looking up there once in a while, like, if I had put, or Candy had put the sheep on different places, I don't think anyone would be sitting there like, man, the sheep were not there. There's no way the sheep would one on each side. They'd both be together. They'd both be in the back. No, it's just totally wrong. No. But you see a dragon, that changes everything. There's some things that impact us or should impact us. Well, the same thing for our life. You know, the fact that there's a spiritual realm should change everything. It should. Does it? Do I live my life? Does my life show I believe there is a God? I believe Jesus was His Son and died for sins and wants me to have abundant life, wants me to have peace, wants me to have joy, wants me to have assurance. Do I live like there's a spiritual realm? Or do I live like the most important things are where the sheep are in my life? Some physical questions. You know, the spiritual realm also, as you think about, maybe people the spiritual realm impacts our lives whether we're aware of it or believe in it or not. It's not just, well, I don't believe in it. I once had a conversation with a friend, and spiritual things came up, and she said, I don't believe in hell. I said, I don't believe in Greenland. I've never been to Greenland. I think maybe it's just people made it up. People want me to think there's a Greenland. I've got no proof. I tried to make the point. It doesn't matter whether you believe in it or not. If it's there, it's there. What's the evidence say? It just says, I don't believe in it. There is a spiritual realm. There is evidence. Seek it out. Find out what it says. Have you examined the evidence for God, for Jesus? Exactly how it impacts the nature of the spiritual realm. How does that happen? Well, you need to realize what is going on in the spiritual realm. One, there is one. But what's it like then? If I say, okay, there's a spiritual realm, what's happening? Well, you know what the Bible tells us is happening? There's a war going on in the spiritual realm. It's interesting, whenever the people take a poll, and whether it's a Christian pollster or not, doesn't matter. Whenever they take a poll and ask people, do you believe in God? Do you believe in Satan? The number of people who believe in God is always higher than the number of people who believe in Satan. So we're not talking about people, do you believe in the supernatural realm or not? Obviously you say, no, I don't believe in God or Satan. But of people who believe in a supernatural realm, more people believe in God than Satan. The last survey I saw said 74% believe in God, but only 57% believe in Satan. Satan's real. The Bible makes it clear. Satan is a real being. He's not a supernatural being in the sense of a divine being, like a fallen God, a smaller God. He is an angel. He is a created being. He has extreme power. He's not more powerful than God. But he is real. He rebelled against God. We don't know all the details. Some people aren't even sure if this verse in Isaiah 14 applies to him. Oftentimes it's used that way. Isaiah 2 says, or 14:2 says, how you have fallen from heaven, morning star, son of the dawn. You have been cast down to the earth. You said in your heart, I will ascend to the heavens. I will raise my throne above the stars of God. Satan rebelled against God. The Revelation passage talks about that. Did he think he could? Apparently he did. He thought, I can take God. Didn't work. Didn't happen. Now, that was prior to the garden when that happened. After creation, because Satan's a created being. Prior to the garden, because we see Satan show up there. But there was still some uncertainty about the outcome until the cross. He wasn't sure exactly how things would play out until it became clear. Verse 11 talked about that. He was triumphed over by the blood of the cross. It's like in wars. And I remember reading about World War II. Both in the Pacific and definitely the European front. There came a turning point where everyone knew who was going to win the war, including the eventual losers of the war. But they didn't stop at that point. They kept fighting for a while. Satan knows he's lost, but he continues to fight. Again, now no longer against God to overtake him, no longer even against the church as a whole, but against people as individuals, because he knows I can win some battles there. I can win some battles there. You know, here in the United States, we've rarely been in a war zone. No one here lived through the Civil War or the Revolutionary War. Well, we haven't had a war zone. That's different in other parts of the world. It affects their life. I remember seeing when the battles were going on in Sarajevo, and then they would show, do you remember, there was an Olympics in Sarajevo. Those same streets, people were, running from snipers. It had been packed with people rooting on their cheering for their teams, carrying their flags. What a difference it makes if you're in a war zone or not. Well, think about it. Am I living like I'm in a war zone? What if a person, years after the Olympics, when a battle was going on, is going down the middle of a Sarajevo street waving their team's flag? You're out of your mind. There's a war going on. But how often do we as believers live like we're in a war zone? Very often I think we don't. We're just still waving the flag. Do-do-do. I don't realize there is a spiritual battle taking place. Daniel 10 talks about this battle. It's interesting. It says there, Daniel had started praying and an angel was sent to answer the prayer. The angel says, since the first day that you set your mind to gain understanding and to humble yourself before your God, your words were heard, and I have come in response to them. But the prince of the Persian kingdom resisted me 21 days. Then Michael, one of the chief princes, came to help me. Realize what that's talking about? Daniel prayed. Someone sent this angel to answer Daniel's prayer. He was in a fight with a demon for 21 days. Couldn't get through to Daniel until Michael, the archangel, came and helped him overpower that demon. Wow. You ever stop and think about that going on around us? That's what's happening. And not just going on around us, it's going on about us. The next thing we see is we are under attack. We're not in a war zone, and sometimes in war zones, civilians are treated differently. There's been times where the armies tried not to kill civilians. There's been times when they didn't care. Well, it's not just like we're in a war zone and it's dangerous, but we're the civilians who aren't under target. We are the targets. You and I are the ones under attack in the war zone. And again, Satan's initial tactic was this accusation. He would say to God, listen, these people, they've sinned, they aren't holy, they aren't absolutely righteous, they have no business being in a relationship with you. And all God could say is, you're right, but. Until then, he was defeated by the blood of the Lamb. And now he knows that anyone who accepts Christ's payment for their penalty is justified to spend eternity with God. And so now he attacks us to keep us from accepting that payment of the penalty, to cause us to refuse it. Verse 17, the dragon was enraged at the woman and went off to wage war against the rest of her offspring, those who keep God's commands and hold fast their testimony about Jesus. Satan knows he can't destroy the church, but he also knows I can cause some people either never to accept Christ or to reject their faith in Christ. And he does it all the time. He's working at it, attempting it all the time. He succeeds regularly against people who never thought he would. This is what's taking place. And it's not meant to make us worry, okay, am I going to fall at any second and I can't help it? No. But realize there is an enemy attacking me. Ephesians 6 talks about this. It says, for our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers of this dark world, and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. How much do you think about that going on? How much do you think that I am under attack by demons? Satan's trying to attack me. Satan is attacking me. And also, often when we do, the one thing we talk about is, the devil made me do it. No, the Bible doesn't say that. The Bible says we're able. It says in 1 Corinthians, God is faithful. He will not let you be tempted beyond what you can bear, but when you are tempted, He will also provide a way out of it so you can endure it. And the one time people acknowledge Satan, what do they say? The devil made me do it. No, I have control. I make the choice, but he is trying to get me to fall away from God. And it's not even so much he's trying to get me to sin specifically, because you know what? As a Christian, if I sin, I'm forgiven. What he's really trying to do, and when you read the armor of God passage see what the focus is. It's not about getting us to sin, to say this word, do that thing, gossip. It's trying to get us, it's trying to undermine our faith. Because that's the basis for our relationship. That's what receives grace. By grace through faith. His attacks there are to get us to get to the point that I no longer have faith in God. I no longer rely on Him. I no longer think I need to. I no longer think I'm worthy. I never was worthy, but I think now it matters. Whatever it is, he tries to get us to no longer have that faith. Satan is attacking us all the time. You know, I don't know if you're going to go home and look for a dragon to put up behind your nativity scene, but you need to do something to remind yourself. There is a spiritual realm. It's a war zone, and I'm the target. My family is the target. Satan doesn't sleep. He's been around a long time. He's not all powerful, but he's certainly wise. He knows how to attack people. He knows what works and what doesn't. Well, if you've been here, you know that I always talk about a root problem. Something I always compare it to a hole in the bucket. And if you got a bucket with a hole in it, you pour water in it, what's going to happen? It's all going to run out. Well, today I poured a lot of water in the bucket, but if there's a hole, it's not going to do any good. And so what's the hole in the bucket problem? Well, you know, in one sense, I didn't even realize maybe, or I didn't know the depth, the extent to which there's this spiritual dimension. But the real root of the problem is, for a lot of us, we don't want to know. You know, we're pretty comfortable the way things are, and I don't really like the implications of thinking about this spiritual realm, certainly for non-believers. You know, I don't want to become a Christian. Why? Not because they don't believe in it sometimes. Every once in a while, they'll say honestly. I remember a woman at the church in Arizona, she was talking to someone, and he just finally said, you know what, I don't want to believe, because if I do, I'll have to give up all these things I'm doing. It wasn't like, oh, there's just not enough evidence. No, I don't want to. And we look at him and say, oh, that person versus me, I believe. You know, there's things in my life. I don't really want to think about all of this. I don't really want to think about, boy, my whole life's under attack. I need to be, you know, where is my commitment? This examination I need to do. You know, where's my heart? Is it hard? I'd like to say, you know, I live a pretty good life. I preach every Sunday. I teach Sunday school too. I must be okay, right? Well, God thinks I need to work on surrender. We talked about that in Sunday school. Like, yeah, you ain't got that one down yet. Let's work on it. And there's a part of me that says, I'd really rather not. I'd really rather the spiritual dimension didn't include that. I'm doing okay, right? Look at all the things I say. Look what people see about me, God. Pretty good. Like, that's not all there is. And the same thing's true for us. And I think on some level we know it. God, can't I just show up on Sunday? I mean, look how that's so much better than so many other people. It's snowing and I showed up today, God. Bonus points. God says, no. It's not just about that. It's about everything. It's this all-encompassing spiritual dimension to my life, my relationship with God. And so the key to overcoming, to fixing the hole in the bucket, is to realize there is a spiritual dimension. We are under attack. There are implications, yes. You know what? My life is more difficult in some ways because I'm a Christian. It would be easier if I didn't have to work on surrender, if I didn't have to get up, early on Sunday morning, if I did all these things, if I could lie when it's in my best interest, it would be easier. But what I need to realize is, look at this passage. What do we see God doing for believers the whole time? He's fighting for us. He's fighting for us. You know, ultimately the cross, think about it. God sent His Son to earth, not just to tell us some great things. You know, we often remember Christmas, God sending His Son, the cute little baby. He sent His Son to die. You think God did that because He wants to make our life more difficult? Because ultimately that's my goal. You can't wait to stick it to these Christians. No. You know, Galatians says it is for freedom that Christ has set us free. You know, does that mean we have freedom to do anything we want? No, but we have freedom from an eternity separate from God. We have freedom from worry and anxiety if we trust in God. We have freedom from thinking it all depends on me. Freedom from, I've got to provide, I've got to get through. No, I have freedom. It's a blessing to believe in God. And so, last thing this morning, what do I need to do now? And I think you can sum it up with the classic stop, look, and listen. Stop and consider the spiritual realm. You know, most of us, even as Christians, spend more time, and I think even in a church setting, I think we spend more time worrying about where the sheep go than the spiritual realm. I think we spend more time worrying about the order of service than what really happens while we're here. I think we spend more time worrying about, did I make it to church X number of times versus am I living for God all the time? Realize the spiritual thing. We've seen in Mark, you know, we can think about spiritual things in physical ways. You know, here we are thinking about God, but if we're thinking about, well, did we do this right? Did we follow this order? Did I do that thing? I've thought about a spiritual thing in a physical way. So stop, look for implications. You know, a physical dragon, if you walked out of here today and there was a physical dragon just hovering in the sky, that'd change, like, you know, your thought of like, where are we going to lunch? It would just change everything. Well, it needs to change. As believers, it needs to change. What are the implications? Look for those. And then listen. You know, God is active. I don't believe He's going to talk to you audibly, but God will make known what do you need to do. Again, I shared, you know, my word for 2018, I focus on one word each year, is going to be surrender. God's already let me know some ways that I need to work on surrender. And just on the drive here, I told Him, like, God, it's not even 2018 yet. Give me at least a week, right? No, He's showing me. He'll tell you if you listen. And so what do I need to do? And then, of course, the real question is, what will I do? We all know there's some things I need to do. What will I do from this moment forward? And as we have our hymn of decision, hymn of invitation, that's the decision we all need to make. Am I going to take anything today and act on it and live it out? Or am I going to just shake my head and say, yeah, there's a dragon there now? So we're going to stand and sing this hymn of invitation. Certainly if you need to make a decision to accept Christ, come up and talk to me. If you need anything, it's something about my life with Christ, for Christ, let's make the decision now.